So we are now in our third week, I think, of this sermon series on becoming a future-ready church, which is based a little bit on this book, Becoming a Future-Ready Church. And I keep forgetting to mention that you can find a couple of copies, or a copy or two, in Fellowship Hall. If you want to grab one and follow along, or grab one and read it and bring it back, we can just kind of pass them around for those who are interested. But it is important to note that the authors of this book come out of the evangelical traditions of Christianity. And while the evangelical traditions and the mainline traditions like the United Church of Christ share a lot of things in common, there are some important differences. So not everything that they write quite applies to us. So I need to come at this a little bit sideways. Last Friday and Saturday, I was down in Bloomington visiting my mom. I was getting her settled into her new room where she is. I was taking her a TV so she can watch the news, because that will surely make her happy. Bringing some artwork that she had given to me to take care of, making it a little more homey. And I had some downtime one afternoon between the time that she decided to take a nap and the time that I could check into the hotel. So I went to a big corporate bookstore chain. And whenever I am in a big corporate bookstore chain, I wander around to certain sections. And one of the sections that I always wander to, just to get a sense, is the one that says religion at the top. And every time I enter that section, I am a little disappointed. And this time I was really disappointed. See, these books, these shelves, these sections are full of books that make arguments for a version of Christianity, for a version of Jesus, for a version of God. There are books that purport to argue and to show that God must exist, and he's a big guy in the sky, the creator of all that is and the judge of all who walk the earth. And there are books that purport to argue and to show that the Bible is entirely and completely reliable, that it is, as they say in some statements of faith, inerrant in all manners pertaining to salvation and creation and science and everything else. And there are books purporting to argue that if you are not this kind of Christian, then you are not a Christian at all, and that God who lives in the sky, the creator and the judge, has plans for you. This is always troubling to me, because this is not the kind of Christianity that I know. This is not the God who I know. This is not the Christ who I know. And there was one book on the shelf that I saw the title of and had to pull it down to take a look. The title of the book was something like, "It's Not Like Being Black." And it is a book about how the civil rights movement and all that it has brought forth does not so much apply to LGBTQ folk. And the little blurb inside the front cover was about how the world has fallen so far, about how, and trigger warning right here, for me as well, about how people are accepting of perversion and confused about gender, and about how pedophilia is just everywhere because the nation has lost its Christian way. And if people would get back to church, and people would get back to orthodoxy, and if people would get back to what real Christians believe, all of that would disappear. The blurb on the front, on the inside of the front cover, was a bunch of lies about people who I know. And that hurt. But what hurt more than just what it said is that for this large chain bookstore, that is the kind of thing that belongs on the shelf in the religion section. And that for many people, for people who grew up in evangelical churches, for people who have grown up in mainline churches, for people who are members of churches, for people who have walked away from the church, for people who have never set foot in a sanctuary, that is exactly what Christianity is. I've said before that most people, most of the time, do not think about us. Most people, most of the time, do not think about First Congregational United Church of Christ in DeWitt or any other of the First Congregational United Church of Christs that exist anywhere else. Most of the time, most people don't think about church. But most of the time, when most people think about church, most of the time, when most people think about Christianity, most of the time, when most people think about American religion, we are casually lumped in with all of the stuff in the religion section of a large chain bookstore. And if that is what I thought this religion was, I also would not be here. Because church hurt is a real thing, and religious trauma is a real thing, and bad news disguised as good news is a real thing. And that is what far too many people expect. Because so often the people who have been purporting to say, here is the gospel, here is the good news, have delivered something not unlike the inside cover of that book. Here are the arguments for the existence of a God who does not like you at all. Here are the arguments for the infallibility of a book that preaches against you every third verse. Here are the arguments for a Jesus who would save you if you were just different and changed who you are and gave up everything about you that makes you you. That is, for so many people, what this thing is. In this chapter of this book, the authors bring up Rachel Held Evans. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but I love me some Rachel Held Evans. Early on in my time here, we read during a Lent, I think it was, Searching for Sunday. And I remember somebody asking, why are we reading this? We don't share this story with Rachel Held Evans. We're not people who were in maybe not so great a church who left. We're the good folks. And I had to say it's because for so many people this is the story that they know. And so I remembered this quote. I'm frustrated and sad to think of all the good people who have abandoned Christianity because they felt they had to choose between their faith and their intellectual integrity, or between their religion and their compassion. And there are a lot of people who make that choice. Some people make that choice by walking away altogether. Some people make that choice by changing churches. Some people make that choice by sitting in a church that they aren't sure they can be a part of, but dang it, that's where they grew up, that's what they know, that's what Christianity is after all. Some people make that choice by deconstructing their faith, taking it all apart and getting rid of the things that don't resonate. And maybe sometimes they put it back together, and sometimes they don't. But there is this core, vital, important message that gets missed in all of that. And it is this. It is this thing that Paul is talking about, and we'll get into that in a sec, but the core, the thing, the critical, vital thing is that the church is made up of the people. And if you are a people, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey or whether you like the statement of faith, you have a place in this body. You have a place in the church. And while the church is important, the institution is important, the institution is not the same as the body, and as part of the body, you can change the body. You can wrap the body around you a little bit. You can say, I am an eye, and we must see. I am an ear, and we must listen. I am a tongue, and we must speak. I am a whatever, and we must, because that's how bodies work. Now suddenly I need both pieces of technology. In this passage today from 1 Corinthians, Paul is talking about spiritual gifts. So he writes a little bit before our reading for today, now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for good. If you are part of the body, you have a Spirit working within you. You have the Spirit working within you for the common good, even if some of us aren't so sure that it is good or common. But God has so arranged the body, giving greater honor to the inferior member, that there may be no dissension within the body, but the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, if one part of the body suffers, does not feel welcome, does not feel embraced, does not feel loved, does not feel cared for, if one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is honored, all rejoice with it. Paul is talking about spiritual gifts. And Paul's point is that this thing only works if everyone can bring their gifts to the table. And that means accepting each other as we are and helping each other grow in faith ever onward towards love. And we know that this is about spiritual gifts and growing towards love because Paul is about to give us that passage that is read at every single wedding. If I speak in the tongues of humans and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions and if I hand over my body so that I may boast but do not have love, I gain nothing. Paul just took all of these spiritual gifts, the ability to speak in tongues and to interpret tongues, the ability to prophesy, the incredible generosity of giving away all that we have. He just took every spiritual gift and said, no matter which one I have, no matter what gift has been given to me, if I don't have love, then those are not worth anything. Those gifts are dust. Those gifts are garbage. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. And now back to those spiritual gifts. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love remain, these three, and the greatest of these is love. All of the books in that religion section, every book on a shelf in that religion section, should be, if it is about Christianity, if it is about Christ, should be about love. Every church, as an organization, as an institution, every congregation should be about love. Everything that we do, everything that we are, should abide in love. That is the goal, that is the end. All of the other stuff is window dressing. All of the other stuff is exercise on the way to love. And it breaks my heart. And I am sure that it breaks Christ's heart that so many people do not expect that from a church. So many people are willing to walk away or walk on by because they do not expect love. Or worse, because they have been shown the unloving version of our faith. So how do we move towards being a future-ready church? How do we move towards something else, something that grows, something that becomes bigger? Yes. Something that becomes fuller, something that becomes richer. We love. Not just privately, not just relaxedly, not just casually, not just quietly, not just on the inside. We love loudly. We create a counter-narrative. We start taking the books off the shelf in the religion section and replacing them with something else. We start saying, this is about love. No matter who you are, no matter where you are on life's journey, no matter what part of the body you are, and we are all part of the body, this is about love. And everything else is temporary. I want to close with another quote, again, not from the book. This is from Carey Nieuwhof, who's a consultant kind of guy, runs a bunch of stuff on church growth. I've read a bunch of his stuff on church growth, and it's good. It all makes sense. And I mentioned earlier this idea of deconstruction. We don't have a lot of experience with that because we in the United Church of Christ are always taking our faith apart and putting it back together again. It takes different shapes and different forms and does different things at different times, but there are a lot of people who have walked away from churches because they had to take their faith apart and they weren't sure that they could still be part of it. And here, Carey is talking about that thing and the danger of deconstruction without reconstruction. And he says, if the path you're on isn't making you more generous, compassionate, hopeful, and merciful person, a more generous, compassionate, hopeful, and merciful person, or in other words, more like Jesus, then the destination isn't worth the journey. Now, he is talking about deconstruction. He is talking about walking away, and he is urging people to reconstruct, to make something new, to find a way to put their faith together again, to return. But I am telling you, if you are in a church, if you are in this church, if you're watching online and you're in a different church, if that is not making you more generous, compassionate, hopeful, and merciful, if this project is not making you more like Christ, if this is not serving as, I don't love this metaphor, but I'm going to use it anyway, if this is not serving as a gymnasium for the soul, then the destination is not worth the journey. If all we have is the membership card for the gym, and we don't go, and we don't take the classes, and we don't use the machines right, if all we have is our name on a list and we don't pay attention to the sermon, or gather together in fellowship hall, or work with the takeaway, or do any of that, then it's not worth it. Nieuwhof is talking about deconstruction and reconstruction, but this is just as much about the church and being part of it. So let us be a gymnasium for the soul. Let us be a place where people come to experience love. Let us love loudly and invite others into love, that we together might exercise love, might get that muscle pumping, might become more loving for everyone, always, until everything else fades away, until tongues and prophecies cease, and all that remains is love. Because I'm telling you, if there is any need that people have, if there is anything that people need more of, if there is anything that people will rush towards because we are desperate for it, it is love. And we have so much love to share.